first of all, I just wanted to kind of talk about the kind of overall strategy of our kind of international outreach, just to give you a bit of a flavour of what that looks like and where data bridges and adequacy sits within that wider kind of context. So first of all, the National Data Strategy Framework behind me, I kept with the DCMS hot pink font, just as a bit of a nod. But yeah, so we are obviously a new department as well, so we're now the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. Important to kind of draw that distinction, because obviously we now have under one roof a few more tools to do this kind of stuff with. So again, the main missions of the National Data Strategy around Mission 1, unlocking the value of data across the economy. Mission 2, securing a pro-growth and trusted data regime. Mission 3, transforming government's use of data, so very much inside the public sector. Mission 4, ensuring security and resilience. And Mission 5, which is where we come in, championing the international flow of data. So I just wanted to give that overview, because all those missions are quite interdependent, and a lot of what we try to do has to kind of bear in mind the other missions as well. So that's just a bit of flavour. We've already talked about the DPDI bill in some detail. So again, just an overview there of what that kind of is all about. So pro-growth innovation, reducing burdens, delivering better public services, transforming the ICO, and also reforming the international data transfers, again, where we come in. So focusing specifically on international data policy. So we know there's a complex global landscape, right? There's increasing fragmentation between regulatory approaches, which leads to uncertainty, and that obviously has a knock-on effect to businesses. More and more countries are introducing their own data protection legislation. There's also a tendency that we're seeing globally at the moment around sort of digital protectionism, and that kind of can sometimes lead to unjustified barriers to data flows being put up, and that increases tension between this kind of free flow of international data and governments' need to keep their citizens safe from hostile actors. So it's a really important kind of thing to kind of draw out. All the decisions that we're making here are with that kind of balance in mind. And finally, in the context of COVID and climate change, this safe international exchange of data has never been more key to tackling these kind of issues. So really important that we do this stuff. International priorities then. First, bilateral data and digital partnerships, so deepening our policy relationships with our closest international partners. Data adequacy or data bridges, and alternative transfer mechanisms, where I come in. So again, striking agreements with various kind of partner countries and designing mechanisms that can be used globally for the sharing of data. Multilateral solutions, so working with the usual kind of great and the good, the OECD, Council of Europe, G7, etc., to kind of build solutions that are scalable. And finally, regulatory cooperation. So again, strengthening cooperation between regulators and using things like MOUs to support businesses and to support citizens. So just a kind of overview of the things we're talking about when we talk about international data transfers. We have obviously the data bridge itself, which is the kind of the bigger agreements that we have in place with various countries. We have the 43 that currently exist, and then there's also another few on stream, which I'll talk about shortly. But we also have other things as well to think about. So we have standard contractual clauses, which is the way that obviously businesses transfer data kind of between various regions without a data bridge in place. We have binding corporate rules, we have codes of conduct, etc., etc. So these are all tools that we look at, and all of these can potentially be the right solution for businesses. We don't just look at one thing. So it's important to kind of look at that wider kind of context and landscape as well. So as I mentioned, adequate countries, jurisdictions and territories. So currently we have data bridges with the countries that are named in this slide. So EU member states, Andorra, Isle of Man, Gibraltar, New Zealand, Israel, Faroe Islands, etc. And all of these contain a test for adequacy. So currently, there is a 4-year window with which we must reassess every decision that we have on adequacy. That's actually something that's changing with the DPDI bill, and we're removing that 4-year window. And also there are various different elements in here, such as the ICO giving an opinion on each of the agreements that we look to strike, the role of Parliament in kind of having oversight of those data bridges and those agreements, and also this kind of constant monitoring, reviewing, and challenging of the adequacy agreements or the data bridges that we have in place. I've already mentioned that. So yeah, so current data bridge priorities. So the US is obviously the big one. We announced the US as a priority destination for UK adequacy decisions in August 2021. In December that year, our Secretary of State at the time issued a joint statement on the commitment to deepening the UK-US data partnership. Just recently, so literally last month, we managed to do what we call the agreement in principle. So that was for our Prime Minister to jointly announce with Joe Biden that we will be, subject to everything being present and correct in the next few months and finalising our assessments, our mutual assessments. The data bridge will come into effect in 2023. So we're currently working on that timescale, and breaking news this week, the US has now designated the European Union as a region, and the EEA, in fact, as a region that can access the redress mechanism in their new data privacy framework, which is a huge step towards that kind of final agreement happening between the EU and the US. And we welcome that because that is the basis upon which we will be building our own agreement in due course.